On today's Remington's Inside the Industry, I'll be sitting down with a hunting industry lifer, Tony Caliguiri, a man that wears multiple hats in the shooting, hunting, and conservation industry. Tony is a successful businessman, a well-traveled international hunter, and a dedicated conservationist who puts his money and time where his heart is. But ask him where he's happiest, and he will tell you it's either high up on a sheep mountain or following behind any one of his world-class bird dogs. This podcast is brought to you by Remington Firearms. For more information on the new era of Remington, visit our site at remarms.com. Today we are talking to Tony Caliguiri. Tony is CEO and president of Boyt Harness Company, Mud River Dogs and Hunting Gear, and Goki Boots. Tony, welcome.
Thank you, Ken. It's good to be here.
And as we were talking just before, I'm surprised we hadn't met before. I've been a big fan of, because we haven't met, I haven't been a big fan of you, but certainly of some of your products. I've used Boyt, multiple things of Boyt. So I've always, I know of your company, certainly.
Same with Remington. Matter of fact, I'm staring at my old 700 Classic and 35 wheeling, and I'm going to head right for the deer stand as soon as I'm done talking with you.
Oh, good for you. Try to get that afternoon hunt in.
Yeah.
But what about shotguns, Tony? Tony, well, look, let's talk about it a little bit. I think the first time that I've really knew a little bit about you was because I'm certainly not as avid, but I love upland game and waterfowl. I've got this wonderful 5-year-old yellow lab that I've sent for training, et cetera, et cetera. So I saw the movie that Safari Classics produced of November Winds, and I just thought it was absolutely fabulous. I really enjoyed it because it really told a story of a man with his dogs.
Sure. And I don't even really know how November Winds came about. I think we'd shot some video and had some good stuff. And Dave said, let's sit down and do a quick script. And we literally wrote that script at my kitchen table in about 15 minutes and put the video in. It seems like it turned out well, and it was a lot of fun to do. And especially since most of those dogs have since passed away, I always like watching it just to see my old dogs in there, and it brings back a lot of memories. But yeah, I mean, I grew up upland hunting in Iowa and have had the opportunity to hunt all over. I don't know, I go back and forth. I love my dogs and upland hunting, but I'm a pretty dedicated sheep hunter too. So they kind of rank 1 and 2 depending on where my pocketbook and mindset is that particular month.
So far, from others, I have to say I think sheep wins when it comes to Tony Caliguiri, because I've heard that all that Tony wants to talk about is sheep hunting. So
it's not necessarily true, but
no, I know it. I was being a little facetious, but I think it's certainly one of the, obviously, probably you're synonymous with sheep hunting, I think.
Well, I've been blessed, and fortunately have been able to get back a little as a director of Wild Sheep Foundation and volunteering and raising money for different sheep products. So that's been pretty good as well.
Well, I grew up in Western Canada in the Canadian Rockies, and we did a little bit of hunting, but I always wanted to go sheep hunting. I never did. Then I didn't hunt for a number of years, and then I started hunting again, and now my bloody knees just won't allow it. So I'm saddened that I got to this point that I would like to be able to do one of the things I've always wanted to do and physically can't do it anymore.
Yeah, well, there's still a lot of easier places to hunt sheep, but the Western Canadian Rockies are probably not the place, but you get in places in the lower 48 and Mexico where it's just not as tough as where some of those thin horns are. So don't give up hope yet. And there's always replacements. I've got a left knee replacement, and I've been on probably 7 or 8 sheep hunts with that replacement knee, and it works better than my right knee.
Well, I would like to say the same, but I'll just tell you a little story here. I won't take much time, but I've had osteoarthritis in my knees. I played football when I was young. I skied most of my life, et cetera, et cetera. I've had osteoarthritis in both knees, and knowing full well at some point in time I'd probably have to have a knee replacement. So 2 years ago, this coming June, so a year and a half ago now, I was scheduled to go fishing up in Haida Gwaii, so off the northern Canada, off the coast of Alaska, and then I was going to Africa. So I went to my orthopedic surgeon friend in upstate New York and got steroid injections in both knees. The next day, I had a terrible, terrible pain in the one knee. Long story is that I got a strep infection in one of the knees.
Oh
and
gosh.
and the worst thing, it was the better of the two bad knees. Like, I mean, considerably better. So I had 2 operations. I spent just a week in the hospital, 2 operations, but I also had to have intravenous antibiotics for
Sure.
about a month. And then I went to physiotherapy 3 times a week for almost 7 months. And I could not put any weight on my leg. I could put a little bit. I used to have a cane, a crutch, and you know what happens when you lose mobility, your muscles and your tendons just all go. And finally, I found a doctor that specialized in tumors, cancer, and infections of the joint. And he took one look at my knee and he said, "You need to have a knee replacement." He said, the infection ate all your cartilage and you'll never walk because you've got zero cartilage left. So I had the knee replacement a year ago, December, and
Oh, okay.
and that knee is great, except for because it wasn't used for those 7 months, it's still not quite 100%. It hasn't got all its muscle tone back. It hasn't had the stretch and of the ligaments and tendons that it needs. So it's not as good as it should be, but a hell of a lot better than it was. So now I'll have to get the other one done. I know that. So
Well,
I won't
you
give up
might
hope.
be a new candidate for a sheep hunt then.
Maybe. Really, I would love to do it because I've hunted many things, and but sheep has been always one of the Rocky Mountain Bighorn sheep has always been kind of something that I wanted. And the worst thing is, I grew up in the Rocky Mountains. I used to go hiking around the mountains. I'd run into sheep all the time. Never once thinking, "Gee, I want to shoot one," but today I'd love to. Anyway,
Sure.
so
Sure.
so but you've been on not just an avid sheep hunter. If I'm not mistaken, you've been on over 50 hunts outside of the United States.
Yeah, I've been really blessed. I've hunted in Mexico for desert sheep and mule deer and coos deer about 25 times, and Africa several times, and a little bit of hunting in South America. So, growing up as in a large family that hunted, but no one ever dreamed that we would get these kind of opportunities later on in life. It actually was a dream. I'd stay up late at night uh, looking at outdoor life with an old Army surplus flashlight and reading Jack O'Connor stories and all that goes with that. So I think I've been really blessed and fortunate to live out that life that I dreamed about when I was a kid.
Well, I think that, Tony, I really think that so many of us feel exactly the same way. And I think it's something that unfortunately I don't think this generation of parents and children um, are giving the same upbringing to their kids that maybe we had. I know when I was a child growing up in Canada, we were outside and we're in the mountains and like all the time. And today, I think kids are spending far more time, playing games on television.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely changed. And the media is not as targeted anymore either. I mean, when we were growing up, you had three outdoor magazines. Now it's so widespread that I think a lot of it gets overlooked, and especially with kids. And I don't think the internet's been the best friend to hunting or our industry either. So yeah, it's definitely changed.
No, I agree. It probably hasn't. I guess we could have a whole conversation about that. You also, by the way, are I think a good friend of a. We have a mutual friend in Butch Whiting.
Oh yeah, Butch at Cryptech. Yep,
Yes,
we
exactly.
like you guys. We're a Cryptech licensee and have been making um, outdoor gear and clothing and working with Cryptech for about the last 6 years. So it was they've got such a neat story, and it's nice to see their dreams realized too, and coming up with that camo pattern. I remember Butch telling me when when him and Josh were Apache gunship pilots, and they'd fly into a camp emplacement, and they'd see the camouflage netting from up above, and they thought, man, that's the neatest or most efficient camo that I've ever seen. And for them to transcend that from Iraq and Afghanistan to Boise, Idaho, where they're making it for hunting products now, and to see it on Remington shotguns is a pretty cool deal. That's come full circle, and I wish the best for those guys.
Yeah, I do too. Butch has become a really good friend of mine. we talk we talk quite often. Just about various things. We were on a hunt together in Arkansas last year. Was the last January, I guess it was. Was he wanted to test his new flyway pattern, duck pattern, and so we had our gun at the same time. So we spent a few days in Stuttgart, Arkansas, and he's a great guy. I think it's a fabulous story. I wish him the best. Um, and it's also nice to see that without being terribly political, but it's great to see a couple of guys that are really um, trying to build a brand that is not owned by some big conglomerate like Gore or somebody like that. So
Sure,
so I
sure.
wish them the very and the other great thing about it is it's good stuff too.
It is. I mean, it's well thought out. It's well designed. Great fabrics. Even if it wasn't in camo and it was all solid color, I'm sure I would use it just because I love the fabrics and designs and the utility of the entire line so
Yeah.
much.
How Tony? How did you come about? How did you end up doing what you're doing? Did you come right out of school and start this, or what?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
did this company
It's
come
kind of a
about?
crazy story. I went to journalism school and started and always wanted to be in the outdoor industry, and writing was the easiest pathway to that. And so while I was still in college, I was writing um, hunting and fishing magazine articles. Edited a small outdoor magazine that was in Des Moines, uh, and actually joined the Outdoor Writers Association when I was still in school. So it was always kind of a focused target. And then by happenstance, I'd written an article about Lowrance Electronics and one of their first paper graphs and how accurate it was. And lo and behold, the director of PR for Lowrance called me and um, said, "Would you be interested in doing something in the fishing business full time?" And I said, "Yeah, I couldn't wait." And so I was hired by Lowrance as assistant director of public relations originally, which was kind of funny because they're a fishing company, but Daryl Lowrance, who's now passed away, um, I used to travel with him on all of his trips and then do the publicity afterwards. But he always said, "Wouldn't it be great if we had a product that uh, that we could use in the hunting industry. He said, because I really like to hunt more than I like to fish. And I said, yeah, I do too. And of course, this was all pre-GPS, but who would have known, how successful Lowrance became in the GPS world, a lot of it because of hunting. But I left Lowrance, and that's when I first, met the guys, Dave Folson at Safari Classics. We go back for 40 some years, I guess. But left Lowrance, went to Skeeter Bass Boats, and uh, really enjoyed the fishing industry. But my heart was always in the hunting industry. And I was vice president of sales and marketing at Skeeter. We'd been recently acquired, and I was kind of looking for something different. And I grew up in Iowa. I was living in Texas at the time. Um, and the boyt opportunity popped up, and we ended up buying boyt with some investors that I dearly love and have been a part of this organization for 30 years now, and we never would have been able to get this done without them, who were like-minded, loved old American brands, and had the money and wherewithal to make it happen. So we bought boyt. It was very, very small at the time, less than $500,000 in sales, and grew it organically. And with some acquisitions, we were able to buy Bob Allen, which was wonderful because Bob was an old friend, and I'd done some PR work and writing on the side for him. So that was kind of neat to bring that around full circle. Then we ended up with Mud River and the Outdoor Connection, Super Sling, Super Swivel, Rattlers brand, snake proof chaps. Then kind of branched boyt out in the hard case business, which has been a really, really great product extension for us. And then a couple of years ago, we had an opportunity to buy Goki, which, is you're an upstate New York guy. It started in upstate New York, 150-year-old brand, really the originators of hunting boots. And same thing, made in the U.S., and we didn't want to see that brand go away. So we were able to acquire it from the Orvis Company, actually, and add it to the lineup. So we've got, we're still a pretty small company, but we've got a diverse lineup of brands, which always makes it challenging. And especially, it's been a little tough in our industry the last couple of years, as you know. So we keep plugging away. About 60% of what we do is done in the U.S. And with COVID and the ensuing labor issues after that, of course, that's not been fun either the last couple of years. But all that being said, I wouldn't want to be doing anything else, and we do have a lot of fun in this industry, despite the challenges, despite trying to stay American made, and being in a small company where the outdoor industry is consolidating all the time, and things are changing, and kind of like you guys, we just roll with the punches and try and get back into it the next morning after we go home the night before.
Yeah, no, Remington's had a pretty storied future, as you well know. It's 208 years old now. Had many owners after the Remington family. The DuPont owned it for many years, and then an investment group acquired it, and then another one acquired it from that, and it started to go bad about the time that Cerberus acquired it. It seems that their desire for dollars was a lot more important than the slow growth with quality. So they did a lot of damage to the company over a number of years. Had at one point in time, I think I saw $1 billion in revenue and $1.2 billion of debt.
Wow.
And that doesn't usually work too well. So went into bankruptcy. I was brought on by J.P. Morgan Chase as a board of director member when they came out of bankruptcy. But what unfortunately they didn't do when they came out of bankruptcy, they didn't recapitalize the company. So when I came on a year later as CEO, I put the company back into bankruptcy because they didn't have the capital to run it. And then it's just building the brand after that. And I'm pretty adamant about it being an American brand and to make sure it stays an American brand. We of
Sure.
course we of course have the option to build things outside of the United States, but that's not really of great interest. I'll buy some parts from outside of our core competencies from other countries. I have no issues with that, but our core competency is building receivers, building barrels, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, and we, interestingly enough, with the pending acquisition of the Vista ammunition brand,
Hmm.
there will be really hardly any American brands left. Very, very
And
few.
so, how do you think that's going to work? Will they continue to manufacture shot shells and centerfire and rimfire in the U.S., or do you think that'll be moved to European loading plants, or what's your take on that?
I think they'll have to continue producing it here. The simple fact of the matter is, when you start shipping uh, ammunition overseas, the cost of it is just becomes prohibitive because it's so heavy. The other thing is that, and we before I put the company into bankruptcy, is an interesting little tidbit of information is we would ship ammunition, for instance, wherever, uh, excuse me, to Europe or any shipping that required transportation on a ship, primarily because of the weight. Not all freight ships are allowed to carry ammunition because it's an explosive.
Hmm.
So what would happen is we would schedule a shipment going to Germany, for instance, on a certain ship, you know, a month in advance or 2 months in advance. And then it would come to day of loading, and that ship would all of a sudden, well, we've got no room for the ammunition because we filled it with other things. So even though you scheduled it, and they wouldn't take it because their preference is not to transport explosives. So I think it would be a huge mistake if they were to try to produce this overseas and try to get that volume of goods shipped to the United States.
Well, I hope it stays here. They obviously acquired some iconic ammo brands, and it would be a shame if they left the country.
I agree, and I've become pretty good friends with Jason Vanderbrink, and I think that um, I'm sure that they will stay here. I know that it just doesn't make sense to produce it overseas and ship it here. They would be out of the picture with costs. There's no question
Sure.
about it.
Of course, they're somewhat successful with Fiocchi, and um, I guess they'll probably look at that too and see how those metrics work out.
Well, yes, exactly. Because same company now owns Fiocchi, and once this closes, will own Federal and Remington and the other brands as
Right.
well. So that'll be
Right.
interesting. But you mentioned something earlier that is kind of interesting because being a small industry, etc. I after our bankruptcy and so on and so forth, I was at a hunt in Georgia. The Georgia State has a quail hunt every year, and I was invited. And there was a guy in the industry that I had heard didn't like me very much, so I went right up to him and I said, "Hey, I'm Ken Darcy. We've never met. I heard you don't like me." He said, he said, "That's just a rumor." He said, "I don't even know you, so I don't know if I like you or not." But he said, "We're both in the same industry. And the reality is we really need to like each other because the rest of the world doesn't like us very much." I thought that's a good point. you know?
Yeah, it is. It is. We're better off being united and divided and putting other things behind us. I think I agree. I
Yeah.
agree with him.
Well, and but the other thing too is, look, I know there's a lot of people in our industry that there is some of the some of the more well-known brands are not avid outdoorsmen either, but the vast majority of people are avid outdoorsmen, and we're like-minded. We like the same sort of things. We like to be outside. We like to hunt, or we like to fish, or we like to just be outside with the dogs, or whatever it is. Um,
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, this industry is built on passion and love of the outdoors and conservation. And I can't imagine. It always struck me as odd why someone who didn't have those, same passions would get in our industry. And to some, a widget's a widget. You know, a magazine cap's a magazine cap, a stock's a stock, a bolt's a bolt. They don't realize that when it all comes together, it's the result of the baby of an American, like you said, iconic company that's been around for over 200 years. So um, I never got it. I can't imagine someone in the golf industry that doesn't golf, but yeah, I think we're a lot better off with, like you said, like-minded people um, running the driving the brands that we've come to know and love.
oh, I agree, and I had invited. This was before Remington went into bankruptcy. When I was just when I first took over as CEO, I invited a number of the press people to a place in South Texas, FTW Ranch, to look at one of our new products, etc. And the day that these, I think there was 12 or 14 of the writers were coming. They were all arriving from noon onward. So I took advantage of the morning and went out hunting. And to my shock, a bunch of them got there and they were surprised that the CEO of Remington was hunting. And I thought, why would that be a surprise to anybody? I think that, I'm in the firearms industry. I should, but I'm a real believer that if you're to be successful in this industry, you need to be a participant, not just a participant. You need to be passionate about it.
Oh,
And I think more than just passionate about the industry, you need to be passionate about hunting, or fishing or conservation. You need to have that passion. And I'm very passionate about conservation. I've invested, a fair amount. I sit on the Dallas Safari Club board of directors. I think it's just a really, really important thing.
for sure. And how do you know? I mean, like, let's take optics for an example. I mean, um, there are so many new rangefinders now that have the capability of doing things that maybe a rangefinder built in a binocular doesn't have. And I was just sitting in the deer blind last night and thinking, man, this whole binocular harness and case deal is changing a little bit. And now, not only, and as I get older, especially, I mean, I need a place for my reading glasses. I need a place for my binoculars. I need a place for my rangefinder. I need a place for my cell phone, all right there together. Well, that's the kind of stuff that you don't realize when you're sitting at a desk. The only time you think about it is when it gets dark and you can't find your stuff to get out of the blind, and and then you start thinking, man, it'd be nice to have all this stuff together, or whatever, or here's a swivel I can work with gloves because it's 0 degrees and my hands are wet and I don't want to take them out of my gloves and try and get them back in there. Just all those kind of things you can't figure out at a desk.
No, exactly. Well, like one of our guns is our V3 Waterfowl Pro. I've used it for the last number of years. We have a Waterfowl Pro, we have a Turkey Pro, and everything about the gun is oversized, so that when you're loading it, you don't get your glove caught in it. It's easy to everything is bigger, so when people are wearing gloves, they can operate it. And whenever I show that to somebody, they go, wow, finally somebody thought of this. Well, Remington thought about it a number of years ago when they came out with this, but they did a really poor job telling anybody. But now I point it out to people and say, I had no idea. Because you're right. When you put those gloves on and it's cold out, all of a sudden you get your fingers stuck while you're loading a loading a round into
Exactly.
your shotgun. You go,
Exactly.
yeah.
and you'd never figure that out at a desk.
No, exactly right.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, really important that people have this passion, but I'm not so sure that well, we'll see what happens because I have a theory now, and I think it's not too wrong. People that have started companies like you, for instance, maybe you're a little bit different, but many people start a company young, and they've made the companies become very successful, and at some point in time, if in particular if they don't have children to pass it on to, they want to get out of it and they want to sell it. And the people that are buying it generally, in particular in the firearms. Now, maybe with you it's a different thing because you provide goods to shooters, to for dogs, for hikers, for hunters. But if it's the firearms, people there's nobody to buy the companies anymore. The vast majority of private equity people, the most a firearms company will get is 4 or 5 times EBITDA. So there's no buying it at 4 times and turning it into 8 times and then getting out of it. So private equity isn't interested. You can't finance it anymore. It used to be that number of years ago that private equity would say, okay, fine, I'm going to buy it for $100 million. I'm going to put in 20 million and I'll finance 80 million. Well, try to go to a bank and get financing for $80 million in the firearms companies today, not possible.
Not
They
possible.
won't finance exactly. So where do these companies go? I don't know. I don't know what the end game is for a lot of companies. The only end game is private family offices that have a substantial amount of money, and they plan on it. Like Leupold, for instance, Leupold's family still owns Leupold.
Yeah,
So that's I think the industry has changed a lot in the last 20 years, primarily because of financing.
no, for sure, for sure. But the good thing, even though the financial side and the number sides have changed, you look back and you still hope that it's the same people. I mean, look at a nylon 66, first synthetic stock 22. The guys that came up with that at Remington were they trapped when they were kids. They knew what it was like
Yeah,
to be in that marsh and peeling a muskrat off with a woodstock
yeah,
rifle that would be soaking wet. And um, the guys that came up with the 870, the solid block of steel, the dual action bars. That guy was a trap shooter or a target shooter that wasn't comfortable with just a single action bar shooting 1,000 rounds a day and pushing that back.
yeah.
So, I mean, that's what we haven't lost. Everything else has changed. I mean, obviously, the world of of computers and financing and the internet and software and all the other things that go through that. But what you gotta love about this industry is it's still those ideas are still coming from people that grew up hunting and fishing and don't want to see that lifestyle go away and do everything that they can to improve on a product or an experience, to make it better for the next generation. That's
No,
that's what I love about it.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and that's the passion. You'll be interested in since you mentioned the 870. We had an interesting thing happen. I don't know. It was a couple of months ago. Um, so, as you well know, the vast majority of, or maybe you don't, the vast majority of the police departments have used, and I think about 45 some odd countries around the world have used the 870 as their go-to shotgun that is carried in the police car. And a couple of months ago, our distributor in the Ukraine reached out and said, I'm doing a presentation to the Ukrainian military, who the police department falls under the military, and I'd like to do the presentation about the 870. Can you give me some testaments from some of the police departments, or if it's government departments, whoever that might be, in the United States. So we said, sure, be happy to do that. We went out and got one from a department that just finished just last week, bought our V3s. But they sent their testament, and they had used 870s since I think it was late in the 60s, and many of them are still, that original purchase are still in their police cars. So
I'm
there we
sure
are,
that,
almost
yeah,
50 years later, and they're still using them.
and that
So,
doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, you can't improve on the design, and certainly nothing's going to happen to them. So, I mean, you could use the barrel as a jack handle and change the tire on a police car,
yeah,
and it'd still be fine. So,
yeah, no, it was pretty remarkable that they still had a lot of the original ones.
I'm sure they'll be around for years to come. We made uh, some LE shotgun cases for years that had dividers in it and special pouches that were labeled for buckshot or non-lethal or gas or whatever. And I can bet you that 90% of the LE guns that went in those shotgun cases were 870s.
Oh yeah, yeah. Until just recently. Recently, we've been seeing what we're a lot of them are repeating 870s, but we're seeing a movement towards our V3.
Yeah, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. But there's just something very intimidating about pumping an 870 and hearing that sound of steel on steel that I'm sure a lot of officers feel comfortable with.
Well, I think they do, and also people for self defense, for home defense. You know, look, all somebody has to hear is that, and you go,
Yep.
no, no, maybe this is the wrong house.
That or a 120-pound German Shepherd barking, and they'd have both of those in my house.
uh, so German Shepherd as well.
Oh yeah, I've got two German Shepherds in the house, and then a couple of my bird dogs. Most of them are out in the kennel, but yeah, I don't think my wife will ever let us be without a German Shepherd and an 870.
That's perfect. You actually, what the hell was it you said earlier? Just trying to go back a little bit. Oh, you the dogs that with the November winds. You
Yeah.
know, I have a 5-year-old yellow lab now that is just tremendous. And before that, I had a chocolate lab, and I've always had labs. One of the worst things there is that these dogs don't have longevity like us. It's absolutely, when I had to put my chocolate lab down, it was just absolutely terrible.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that puppy at a young age, he and labs are great chewers, but um, um, figuratively, they'll chew a hole in your pocket right into your heart, and they never leave. And um, they're only there for 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 years, and that's the worst part about a lab or any other bird dog is they just
Yeah,
don't live long enough, and it's a killer.
yeah. I
I
remember.
and
No, it really. I remember my lab, and he was just 10 years old, and I noticed a lump. He was really, really being very careful how he sat down and stuff, and I noticed a lump on his leg. I felt around, and so I took him to the vet, and of course the vet's, well, came back cancer, and we can do this, we can do that, we can do. I said, no, no, you're not going to. This dog has had a spectacular life. He's enjoyed his freedom. He's been out hunting all the time, and he's not going to spend the last year or 2 years of his life maximum, you know,
hmm
having pain and discomfort and not being able to do the things that he's always loved doing.
no, totally get it. Totally
Yeah.
agree.
So, what kind of dogs do you have now? Your
Um,
your
we
bird dogs.
I've got English setters, and I've got 5 English setters and 2 English pointers right now. And normally it's reverse. I love pointers. I like them because of the low maintenance more than anything else. Um, and setters are a little more fickle, well, maybe a little more quirky from a personality standpoint. Pointers are just hard charging, go at it every day. I think setters are more aristocratic, and it shows in their personality. Um, and I always had pointers, and then about 15 years ago, I had a friend that was going through a divorce and needed to tear down his kennel a little bit, and he brought a setter down for me to look at, and the dog's name was Dude, and I, I thought, no, Gary, I just don't want to start mixing pointers and setters. And he said, no, I get it. Well, the dog was outside my office, and he was sitting on the tailgate of his truck, and he went to put him in the box, and this dog turned and looked at me, and he lifted his paw and he waved like he was waving goodbye. And I thought, holy crap. I said, get him out of here. He's going home with me. And and that kind of started the setter deal. And he was one of my favorite all-time dogs. He's in that November Winds
Oh, okay.
film. And I built myself a retirement gift a few years ago, although I'll probably never retire or be able to. But and it's a Wesley Richards drop lock, and I had that a bust of Dude engraved in the trigger plate by one of their engravers in England, and it's a great tribute to him, and I think about him every time I use that gun. So yeah, setters were never an intended deal, but they've kind of taken over our life now, I guess.
So do they do the flushing?
No,
Or
the setters and pointers are, they're strictly pointers. This is the first
okay.
time in my life I haven't had a lab, but I used to have until the advent of beeper collars, and now you know, if you try and hunt a lab and a pointer together, the lab hears that beeper collar and he just races in there and flushes before you get a
Yeah.
chance to get there. But I love labs. I mean, it's just kind of um, serendipitous that we don't have one right now. And we were coming home from a trip, actually Sunday, from the Boone and Crockett Foundation, and there was our club, their annual meeting, and there was a gal on the airplane, and she was one of these volunteers that transport service dogs around the country, and she had a 9-week-old lab puppy, and we were just it was just brought back a lot of memories. And my wife said, I can't believe we don't have a lab right now. And I said, well, I'm all for getting another puppy. We'll see how it works out. So, I mean, I can't imagine anything in the world that more. If I think if you set Biden and Zelensky and Putin and all of them in a room and put them in there with a litter of lab puppies, all the problems would be solved in 3 or 4 hours. That's
Yeah.
how that,
Yeah.
that's how neat they are.
They're people ask all the time, pretty regularly about what kind of dog, what kind of dog. And I go, you know what? In my opinion, go with a lab because they're the lab you'll never have to worry about. They'll love you forever. They'll never hurt a child. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And I think they're just great dogs.
They
Um,
are. I mean, there's a reason that they're, the number one service dog breed, therapy dog breed, seeing eye dogs,
oh yeah,
all of that. They've got a high intelligence level. They're very biddable. They're comfortable around people. They socialize easy, and um, they're they never leave you. I mean, uh, a lab wants nothing more than to please you. A pointer, he's more um, he's got a personality that he's in it for his own, not necessarily with you. And
yeah.
some breeds are just never gonna warm up to you like labs do.
Well, I was hunting in Southern Illinois last year. DSC had an event for their what they call their Ascari Club, so I was on that. And one of the guides, and I used him just recently too, but he had um, two German short hairs, and then he had this lab. So he would run at least one of the short hairs with the lab every time. So the short hair was the pointer, and he used the lab as the flusher. And this was in March, so the birds were not flushing and flying very well. You had to really flush hard. This
Sure.
lab I just laughed at because his name was Duke, and he'd get Duke to flush, and Duke would pounce on them. Like he'd jump up in the air about 2 feet, and he'd land on right where they are, and they would fly like the other dogs couldn't get them to fly. I just
Yeah.
laughed. Duke.
Yeah. Yep. No, they're special. I always like to tell people that, God made pointers to have long tails and made retrievers to be labs.
Yeah,
it's,
that's true.
it's that simple. And I love short hairs too, but I used to have an old hunting partner when I lived in Texas. He had 15 English pointers, and I had some short hairs at the time. And I asked him one time, and he was an old World War II vet. And I said, Lawton, do you think you'll ever own a short hair? And he said, hell no, that's how they paid us back for winning the war.
That's pretty good.
But
Uh, do,
but no,
do,
I've had some great short hairs and love them too.
do you train them yourself?
No, actually, people see the dogs and they ask my wife, if is your husband a dog trainer, and she says no, he's a D trainer. And so we'll usually get them as pups, and then I've got a buddy that's probably one of the best bird dog trainers ever lived, Steve Carnes, and so he'll take them, a couple months at a time, and then after a year or two, I get a pretty good started dog back. And we have a preserve that we used to operate commercially, but it's part of boyt, and it's just for photo shoots and things like that now. But the dogs get into a lot of birds, and that's what makes a bird dog. I mean, you can give them the basics, but if you're not going to get them into a lot of birds, they're never going to be a great dog, and that's what they need. So I've been fortunate to do that. And then I'm hesitant to say it in a public forum, but our wild bird hunting in Iowa is probably the best right now that it's been in 30 years. So I'm getting a lot of opportunities to get out now. So that's fun.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I shouldn't say I think you're right. I know you're right. I send my dog up to Minnesota, to Northfield, to Dawkin every year,
Sure.
to get out of the heat in Texas, because I live in Dallas. So to get out of the heat here, and I send him up there. So he spends 2 or 3 months there. I pick him up when it's a little cooler in Dallas. It's not 105 degrees, but and he's at the level that they love training, because he's at such a high level for them. However, he doesn't get to get in enough birds on often enough to be great. He's good, but not fantastic, because he just doesn't
Sure.
get to
And
do it
that
very
bird,
much.
it's just I mean, you can send a race car driver to all the schools that you want, but until he's actually competing in those races week after week, he's never going to be at his full potential. And
Well,
I think the same's true with dogs.
interesting you should mention that, because I race cars.
Oh, really? What do you race?
I have raced BMW. I've raced Lamborghini. I've raced LMP cars, Le Mans prototypes, a variety of different ones, and I do mostly the endurance races. You
Oh,
know,
cool. I did not know that about
yeah.
you. That's pretty
So,
cool.
but you're absolutely right about that, because, just a quick story. When I first, I thought I'd try it, because I always loved driving, and I thought, okay, I'm going to see if I can do this any good. So I went to a school and I did that, and then I got my own car, and I went out and blew the engine the first thing, because I missed shift, all kinds of fun. But anyway, after about a year, after the first year, I got invited to this really high end group of guys, and that there was, I don't know how many, 20, 30 of them. But I got invited to drive with them, me and 3 or 4 other guys. So we were introducing ourselves the first day, and the head instructor, or whatever you want to call him, he asked each of us to give us a little history about ourselves. So I went around the room, and people would say, well, I've been driving racing around the track for 15 years or 17, whatever that was. But it was always well over 10 years. And so it came to my turn, and I said, I've got about 105 days in. And so this instructor said, well, yeah, but how many years? I said, oh, that was last year. So like the dogs, the more you do it, the better you get. And
Yes,
and when
yeah.
you don't do it, it's not that you're bad. You lose that little tiny bit that you need.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And you're right.
Yeah, I
There's a big difference between track driving and race driving.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I it's weird that hunting guys, gun guys all seem to come from a mechanical orientation, that they love cars and airplanes and all those type of things too. And I actually, when I was a freshman in college, I had a introductory sociology class, and I had the semester paper was on the correlation between um, two societies that were totally different, but had very common grounds. And I did that on my buddies that were car guys that also hunted. And the only thing that I could ever come to a conclusion was the bass boat guys, because they love to go 80 miles an hour, and most of them are old time gearheads. But I think the hunting guys, they have that love of cars and trucks, because somewhat they have to be self-reliant and self-sufficient and know how to fix things when they're. I mean, I've watched PHs in Africa literally, tear down an engine in the field and completely rebuild it 200 miles from the nearest town.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that is, but that's a great correlation, and I love the fact that you're into the racing and guns both. I built um, setting in my garage, but I took a '59 Corvette and put it on kind of a Can-Am style tube frame with independent suspension and big brakes and everything. And I always had hopes of maybe racing that in some old vintage SCCA classes or something, but
Oh, the
I
look
never
is
got around to it. But
yeah.
it's
Well, you look. You're not dead yet.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know. But my
There's
wife's
some.
claimed
There's some.
ownership of that car, so
Oh, okay. Because there's
I
some
don't want to take a chance of hurting.
great vintage racing.
Yeah,
I've
yeah, there
raced a
is. I
lot.
love to watch them. I
Yeah,
love
and
to
I've
watch
raced
them.
in a lot of the vintage stuff, which is really fun. But I think I'm not sure that it's motors and stuff like that. May have. I think it's there's two things. I think hunting is really a lone sport. Yeah, you might be with somebody else that you spend some time with.
It's not a team sport,
It's not a team
anyways. Yeah,
sport. The other thing is it's if you want to be a good hunter, you have to be very precise too. You know, if you want to race a car, well, you precision is critical. You know where you turn in, how etc. It's all very critical. So I think that plays a part of it. But like hunting and like shooting sports, the paddock of a racetrack is exactly the same. They're fierce competitors on the track, but in the paddock, everybody relates to me.
everybody's.
Yeah,
You bet. So
because
speaking of precision and being precise and mechanical, and being having the iconic actions in the 700 and the 40 XBs, what do you think about all the long range shooting that's sweeping across the hunting and shooting industry right now? I have mixed emotions on it personally, but I'd be interested to hear your take.
well, I put myself in two different camps, and the reason that I have two different camps is because the long range shooting. When I go to FTW, I've shot out at 1,800 yards before, and I think that that's really cool. I think it's fabulous. I think it's fabulous that we make a gun that can do it, and I love the idea that I can do it. The long range hunting, I'm not in agreement with. I just don't think that's right. I think that I take, and this is myself. I don't, everybody has to think for themselves, but when you're talking of a kill zone on a big animal that might be, let's say, 8 inches in diameter,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 9 inches in diameter, and if you are off even a half MOA, you're out. It's even a half MOA. you're out at 1,000 yards. You're out of that kill zone.
Exactly. I think it's been great for training and recreational, and if you can shoot at 1,000 yards, it makes you that much better at 300 and 400 yards, and
Exactly.
that's I think it's our job and responsibility to get as close as we can to an animal and make the best humane shot that we can. So I'm in total agreement with you. I think it's a great way to train, a great thing to
Yep.
do, great thing to have fun with. But it's and I mean I see a lot of guides and outfitters that are moving away from it and actually telling people in their promotional material, look, if you're trying to kill something at 600 or 700 yards, you've come to the wrong outfitter, because we're just not going to do that.
Yeah.
And
And I, I'm sorry for interrupting.
no, go
Keep going.
ahead.
No, I just, I can do it, but I won't. Somebody asked me today. I'll probably be going to Turkey on an ibex hunt in January, beginning of January.
Hmm.
And so the outfitter asked me. He said, you know, what's how far do you shoot? And I sent him a picture of a 6-inch plate at 700 yards with a dead center shot, and it didn't. And that was my first and only shot. And I said this was at 700 yards, but I said I won't take a shot beyond 400 yards.
Good for you.
You know, and I could maybe verify that because quite honestly, if I'm out Texas hog hunting, I would probably take a shot at any distance
Sure, you
because
bet.
I because I
Different
hate because
story.
I hate
Yeah,
those damn things.
yeah, and most people do.
Yeah,
And most people do.
but
But
but I just I don't think it's ethical. The chances of wounding an animal beyond 400, maybe 500 yards is just far too great, and I think that in my opinion, any respectful hunter has to respect the animal enough not to do that.
100% agreed. I'm all for it for the shooting schools. Or I mean, I've got a 700-yard range at my house, literally 100 yards from my front door. But and I love to shoot that far, but I'm not going to do that with a
No,
game animal.
but it makes you a much better shot at 300 or 400
Sure, it
yards.
does. If
Yeah.
you learn to drive a race car at 180 miles an hour, that makes you twice as good as 90 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And
I'll send you a video at 180 miles an
okay,
hour.
great,
Look,
great.
I've got to wrap up, Tony, but there's one thing I wanted to say before we do is I'm sure you've heard it before, but congratulations, you are this year's winner, as you well know, of DSC's Capstick Award. So I think that's a huge honor, and
Well,
uh,
thank you, and
yeah,
it's very humbling for me. And I've been um, doing things on the conservation side for uh, over 30 years now, and you don't do it to get an award. You really don't. That's not why anybody starts off. Um, but I'm really I think it's a neat deal, and I'm very humbled. And it's a conservation award, not a hunting award, which is pretty cool. And um, I again, very humbled to 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 be there, I guess.
look, I think it's a huge honor. I think that they should be nothing but conservation awards and screw the hunting awards
Yeah,
because
I've
look,
never.
I look, this is a whole different conversation, and I could get myself in a lot of shit from talking at being a board member and stuff like that. But the reality is that you see some of these hunting awards, and they're there because there's very few people that can afford to go on hunts all over the world in one
It's
year.
all about money sometimes, and yeah, we
Exactly.
could make it. We could make a whole podcast on those discussions.
Exactly. And wouldn't it be great
Yeah.
if those same people spent those same hundreds of thousands of dollars in conservation? But I know they don't.
For the most part, there's a lot of
Yeah.
them that do,
Yes, I
but
agree.
yeah, yeah.
So that would be a whole nother. Tony, I'm going to wrap it up now.
All right,
Um,
Ken.
and we'll look. Normally, I'll if you would like, I'd be happy to have you give your company a plug how they can reach you. But we'll put it on our It'll be a headline on the
Sure.
podcast anyway.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So yeah, www.boytharness.com. They can get to all the brands from there.
Perfect. Tony, it was great talking with you. I really
You
enjoyed
too,
it.
Ken. I look forward to seeing you at DSC in January.
Yep, I'll be here. Thanks, Tony.
Thank
All right.
you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Bye.